Hi, this is Healthy Mama B, and welcome to tonight's session. Tonight, we are going to talk about honesty and accountability and how these two factors are so important when it comes to weight loss. When I made my commitment to write a blog about losing weight, it was kind of difficult because, to be honest with you, putting your weight out there is not an easy thing to do. And I made a commitment to be completely honest with myself and the people who follow me and read my stuff about the trials and tribulations of weight loss and the whole journey associated with it. And being honest about my weight has never been something that's easy to do. I've always held it very close to my heart, kind of like a small caterpillar that's been cocooned, and it's only recently that the caterpillar's come out and the butterfly has been flying around. The transition has been both exhilarating and petrifying at the same time, and I'm going to try to explain this. Before I lost my weight, I lived in a perpetual state of denial. I knew that I was overweight. It was pretty clear. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the number on the scale. I saw the way that I fit in my clothes. I saw the way that I looked, but I hated it. But yet I never really took responsibility for it. And here's a really good example of living in the state of denial that I did and not really wanting to take accountability. Every year I would go to the doctor for my annual checkup, and I would wake up anxious that morning, really concerned about what the doctor was going to say about my weight. And I would try to think of every possible excuse that I could come up with to get out of getting on that scale. I knew I couldn't get out of the appointment. I knew I had to go to the doctor. I had to get my annual checkup for whatever reason. I was on blood pressure medication. I was on cholesterol medication, and I had to I had to go to my annual checkup to get my refills. Otherwise, I would never be able to get my medication refills. But I would really think about every possible excuse to get out of getting on that damn scale. Because I didn't want to think of the repercussions of the number, because once you get on the scale, the number becomes very clear, and then you would go into the doctor's room, the examination room, and then you hear it from the doctor about how you need to lose weight, and then it really becomes very clear about how, you have to face the situation. And I was not ready to face the music, and this happened year after year after year. So I would go to the doctor, and instead of owning up to it and getting up on the scale, I would tell the nurse that I didn't want to get weighed. I'd tell her that I would weigh in at home, and I would tell her the number that I weighed in, but I would subtract a couple of pounds from that number because I figured, I was wearing heavy clothes. I had a breakfast, a big breakfast. I had some water that morning, thinking that, of course, it was going to make a difference. But in the end, it never really did. It was always a different nurse every time I would go to the doctor, and I would always get that same face, which is like, yeah, I've heard this story before. You're not telling me the truth, but that's okay. I'm going to let you get away with it because ultimately the doctor's going to make you do it anyway. And we would walk past the scale, and this little person inside of me would jump up and down every single time thinking, woohoo, I got away with it. This is awesome. I'm not going to have to weigh in. This is great. I can continue to live in my little denial. But there were times when my doctor would get really frustrated with me, and he would make me get back out there and get up on that scale. And he would do it so that the number was accurate. And there were a couple of reasons for that. One of which, if you're on medication, you want to make sure that you're taking the right dosage that's equivalent to your weight. And, he needed to see how I was doing in terms of my weight gain. Every year I went up a couple of pounds. So he wanted to make sure that, we wanted to make sure it was documented properly. And so, the first couple of times I tried to convince him that I didn't need to get on the scale, but at the end of the day, he made me do it. And I did. And I was compliant, and I stepped up on the scale like a little kid who was put into the corner. And I was sort of like a defeated child. So I'd get up on the scale, and I would see the number, and I would try to convince myself, even then, okay, that the number was high because I was wearing heavy clothes, like I said, or that I had the big breakfast, or because I was really stressed at work, or because, something was going on in my life that made me eat more than I should have. There were 1,000,001 reasons, but everything was the reason except for me. And before I started my weight loss journey, I never took responsibility for my weight. I wanted to shift the blame onto everyone and everything that I could, everyone and everything in my world, because admitting that I was the result or the cause of the weight meant that I was the failure. I was the person who had no self-control, and I was a terrible person. And all of these negative thoughts would pop into my head if I actually accepted responsibility and accountability for it. But ultimately, all of those thoughts are completely irrational and ties into what we talked about last week about self-sabotage. Sometimes we think certain things about ourselves, and ultimately, it's so very self-defeating. So I was overweight because I made the conscious decision to eat during times when I felt incredibly stressed or very overwhelmed with factors and things that happened in my life, or when I was emotionally taxed. And I ate because food gave me a level of comfort that I couldn't give myself at that time in my life. I also ate when I wanted to celebrate my life. I even drank a little bit here and there when I wanted to have fun. At that time in my life, I lived it under my own conditions, living it the way that I wanted to do, and I made the choices that I wanted to, and ultimately, I had to accept that. It's so important. I had to do that, because to beat myself up for past choices was incredibly self-defeating, and there was no benefit to it. And I realized, when I finally came to the realization, and I realized that I was on this perpetual cycle of this little hamster wheel, okay? I got past the mindset by realizing that it was this constant self-defeating, running around the hamster wheel of beating myself up for years for the choices that I was making, specifically around the food as a result of the emotional stuff that was going on in my life. And when I finally realized it, I decided, you know what? It's time for me to get off the hamster wheel. I just cannot continue on this path, because if I do, one, every time I go back to the doctor, the scale's going to continue to go up. And I was so close to 300 pounds. Remember, I was 297. And if we're going to talk about honesty today, I'll be completely honest. I'm absolutely positive that there were times that I was probably over 300 pounds, but I never got on the scale. There were time periods in my life where I absolutely refused to get on it. But I know that there was a time in my life that I had to have been over 300 pounds, but I never got on the scale to even prove it. So, I realized that I had to do something about it, and I just accepted. And that's really the key here. I finally accepted myself, and I accepted the fact that I had failed. I failed to take care of myself. I failed to stick to a diet program that was going to work for me. I failed to realize that there was no diet program that actually worked for me. Okay. And I accepted all of it, and I was okay with it. Instead of beating myself up about it, which I did for years, because I was angry. I was really angry with myself for not being successful. I would go on a diet, I would lose a few pounds, I would gain the weight back, and then I would be angry at myself for gaining the weight back, and angry because everybody else seems to lose weight. Why can't I lose the weight? So it was really frustrating, and it was this perpetual cycle of misery. It was misery followed by eating, followed by misery, followed by anger, followed by guilt, followed by food. And it was this hamster wheel that just had to stop eventually. And so I realized, and this is where the pivotal aha moment was for me, and I firmly believe that it is the pivotal moment that we all need to take in order for us to really lose the weight. It's understanding that the accountability and the honesty are the two key factors in achieving your weight loss goals. That's the key. So I'm going to share with you a couple of quick tips that you can use in your lives to hopefully move past your past and move forward into your successful futures. Okay? So the first thing is you have to be accountable for your past failures. Okay? You ate, you drank, you were merry, you had a lot of really, really good times. Wonderful. Let it go. You gained weight. You got a little overweight. Maybe you got a lot overweight. That's okay. You are who you are, and now it's time to let it go. Okay? It's over now. You need to accept your previous decisions and let go of any anger or any regret that you may be feeling. Anger and regret are anchors to your soul. I actually wrote that. Okay, and I like that because it's true. They hold you down. Think about a boat that's anchored to the shore. Okay, it wants to go, right? You're in the boat and you want to go. You want to go on the journey, but it's holding you back. The anchor is just holding you back. That is exactly what anger and regret are going to do to you. So you have to let them go. If you release them, you'll finally be able to move forward. And it's very easy to say, release these feelings, right? Yeah, let them go. Healthy Mama B says, let them go. Yeah, that's easier said than done. How the heck am I supposed to do that? Well, in order to release the feelings, here's the key. You have to be able to accept them. You have to be able to accept who you are and the mistakes that you've made, very similar to what I had to do. And this isn't something that takes 5 minutes. It takes a while. It's a process. It took me several weeks to get there. It started when I was visiting my brother in Texas over the summer. I started making some changes to my diet at that time, little tiny changes. I've mentioned it before, where I would give up bagels for breakfast with cream cheese and I would replace it with other things. And while all of this was happening, I was learning to accept myself and forgive myself for all of my past mistakes. Okay. And while all of this was going on, you know, part of the acceptance process for you is going to have to be having an inner dialogue with yourself. And that doesn't mean walking around having conversations, talking with yourself out loud, but it's really just having a conversation internally to process everything that you've been through and all of the feelings that you've experienced as a result of your weight. Okay, your failures, your successes, owning up to them. And some people do these different ways. Some people do this by journaling. For me, the blog has been very helpful because it allows me to write a lot about things. It also helps me stay accountable. So for me, the blog is honesty and accountability combined with a whole lot of other things, because it also helps me help other people, which is very fulfilling for me. But try to journal. If you like to write down your feelings and you feel that that will be helpful to kind of get you to the place where you can accept yourself, then journal. You know, create a space for yourself, either, you know, with pens and paper or a journal, or, you know, something on your computer where you can just write and get it all out there and finally be able to accept it. It has to be sort of like a cathartic experience. And if you don't feel like journaling, you don't want to put it down on paper, then just, you know, have this internal dialogue with yourself when you're driving to the grocery store, or when you're at the gym, or when you're, you know, doing some work. But just make sure that you focus on you. Don't put it in the back of your mind. You have to make sure that it's time for you to focus on you. The bottom line here is that you have to focus on getting out of your own way. Okay, we sometimes get in our own way of being successful, which is also part of self-sabotage, which we talked about last week. Unless you're able to get out of your own way, you're going to prevent yourself from moving forward. So everybody's different, and what worked for me may not necessarily work for you, but I promise that if you try, 1, you'll likely feel a little bit better, and 2, it'll definitely get you on the path to your success. Okay? The second suggestion that I have is to be honest about your daily intake and to track it. This I cannot tell you enough about. You know, I've been on every single diet under the sun, and I'm not going to say that the diets don't work, because they do. Every single diet that I've ever been on has worked. I've lost weight on all of them. But why this one was different for me is that it allowed me to learn how to eat properly, because it wasn't a diet. It was a lifestyle change. I ate everything I wanted to eat, and I just tracked it. I tracked it in an app. There are a lot of different apps out there, and I was mindful. It is key, because you have got to be able to put in everything that you put into your body into the app. You write down everything, good or bad, and you accept when you have days that are higher calories than others. You accept, you know what, it was a day where I had more calories than I should have had, and that's fine. Tomorrow will be a better day, because in life, you're going to learn as you change your lifestyle, that there are going to be days where you're going to eat more than than others, and that's just part of living. You don't want to give up your life to lose weight or to maintain it. Okay. There are days still now after losing 110 pounds where I don't want to track my diet. Sometimes I get tired of it. Sometimes I'm angry that I have to do it. After all of this time, I still have to track my calories, and I try to figure it out in my head. And you know what? Those are the days when I overeat and I get on the scale the next morning and I'm up a pound. So I get right back on track and I start to track my calories and I let go of the anger and I get back onto what I have to do and I track it. Okay? Don't use it as an excuse to self-sabotage. Number 3, own up to your choices. Don't expect to eat perfectly every day. Okay, not every day is perfect because you're not perfect. You're going to have successful days where you're going to stay within plan and you're going to feel like $1 million. And then you're going to have other days where you're struggling and it's going to be really hard for you to stay within your plan, or even because you're so hungry, you're going to want to eat more. Try to make healthier choices on the days when you're very hungry. And on the days when you do wind up eating more than you expected to or planned on doing it, then see if you can exercise a little bit more to compensate for it. And if you can't, that's okay. Get right back on track. You know, when we talked about self-sabotage last week, you know, one of the elements was, well, I messed it up, so I'm done. Okay, don't allow that to happen, because if you say that you're done, like sort of our friend Marianne that we talked about last week, she had cake at a birthday or at the company function or something, and that was the end of her diet. She went off on a binge. Just because you eat more than you probably should doesn't mean that it's the end of your lifestyle change. Okay, so make sure to get back on track. Don't allow it to self-sabotage you. Okay, and don't allow the mistake to allow you to go off on a binge. Okay, and number 4, be honest with yourself and the people who love you. If you're struggling, then share your feelings. Share your feelings with the people in your life, because maybe somebody that you know can validate your feelings and help you process them so that you can get past them. And that'll help you out more so than eating. Okay, a couple weeks ago, we talked about emotional eating and how detrimental that can be. So go ahead and reach out to somebody that you know and who cares about you. And if you're shy and you don't feel like reaching out, if you're embarrassed, if you're afraid that there's nobody in your life that can actually relate to you, there are other avenues. You know, there are times when I have bad days and I'll blog on Spark People, because I know there are thousands of people on Spark People who are struggling with their weight the way I have. And so if I have a day and I want to vent a little bit, I'll write a couple things on Spark People and I get a couple of responses and I know that I'm not alone. It doesn't happen very often because I've got a really solid support system. But if you feel like you're all alone, you're not. You know, the weight loss industry is $1 billion business. There are people out there every day trying to lose weight like we are, and you're not alone. So just keep that in mind. And the people who love you will love you on your good days and your days that are not so good, and they're always going to be willing to listen to you and support you. You know, anybody who knows me offline knows that when I'm stressed, I'm going to want to go off my plan and I'm going to want to go for something sweet. That's just who I am. And, you know, even when my kids are around and they see me going for chocolate, they're like, seriously, Mom, you're going to go for the chocolate? And then I put it down and I walk away. So, you know, it's nice to have that support system, and it's just really important to not hold it in, you know. As human beings, we tend to hang on to negative emotions, and I'm not really quite sure why that is, because there's really no benefit to it, but we sometimes tend to wrap ourselves up in them and hang on to them more than we need to, or we really want to sometimes. And you'll find that once you let go of the negative feelings you have towards yourself and your past weight loss failures and your weight gains, and the more honest and accepting you are of yourself, you are going to be able to be successful and move towards your future weight loss goals. So if you've not received your copy of my Get Started guide, please visit my website. It's www.healthy-mamabee.com and subscribe today. I'm very excited that I am working on a spring newsletter, and that's going to be coming out in a couple of weeks. It's going to have some wonderful recipes and some special blogs and tips and tricks on losing weight for subscribers only. So if you have not subscribed to my site yet, please go ahead and do that. You can do that by either clicking on my Facebook page where it says, I think, check in or sign up or something like that. And then you go ahead and subscribe. And I really hope that you enjoyed tonight's session. If you did, please share the video with your friends and family, because the more shares means the more people that we can help get healthy. If you have any ideas for future sessions, please send me a message. I would love to hear from you. And if you have any questions, we do have a couple of minutes left. I would love to hear from you. So please type them into the chat box and I will go ahead and answer them. I'll give you a minute to do that. And if there are no questions, then I will say, be healthy and be happy and have a great night. Thanks for joining. We'll give it another minute. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. Good night.